I know.
My name is associated with anything yet. Settings.
Yeah, like what do you put your name in?
I
Settings.
think he. Oh, is it?
Oh, I see. Weird. Cool.
Cool.
All right.
John.
So what else are we hoping to do today? Just kind of drawing a map, right? Really, of like how a person typing on a keyboard eventually like affects data on chain and then backwards, how that process happens.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds about right.
And what the sort of like areas of separation are. So SDK, library, API, the graph, our own TypeScript app, our own Vercel deployment. So there may be a couple maps here, but they're all gonna like explain the same thing from different perspectives. So I guess maybe let's start with kind of a flowcharty thing. CJ, I think you make these like pretty naturally and kind of say.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what quite makes sense, but I can do something like, or I can think, oh man, so many things. How do I do this? Okay, so I guess like starting at like more the user side of things, at least like how I think is like we have like, oh my gosh, what is happening? I cannot see what I'm writing, but I am writing.
Oh no, I also see what you're writing.
Okay, so like we have like our honeycombs like app. This is like the kind of like front end kind of thing happening here. Hopefully this will be able to take us down to the level that like I'm thinking. I kind of want to scroll.
Yeah.
Let me actually, I'm gonna scroll in so I can just like
you can
get more
zoom
things.
in, by the way.
Yeah.
You can or you cannot?
You can.
Oh, you can.
And it works pretty well usually. So do that.
Okay, so like we have some like little thing that's honeycombs. I guess like on the side, I'm just gonna put some like external dependencies. So one would be like Ethereum. We also have, I'm just gonna like make that in its own box. We have the graph. Who else are we using externally? Should I like kind of name some key libraries here that we're using as well?
Yeah, I think so.
I think we have Shahruz's UseWallet.
IPFS and factory IPFS.
That's right. Just say and then this is kind of tied into IPFS itself. And there's like some kind of relationship between these guys. UseWallet is mostly like our relationship here. So these are kind of like the external dependencies that we have for the most part. Let's see. I guess there's like next and all this stuff, but I think for now, this is fine.
It sounds like we should focus more on the ones that aren't going away when we switch to more decentralized stacks. So in other words, Vercel and all those are kind of like intermediaries. We're not too worried about getting them on the map, I think, for now.
Yeah, I think I'm actually going to draw like a box around all this because this is like more like how I think of like the tech stack that we're using versus like what's actually happening under the hood. Maybe another good one to put here is ZooStand, because ZooStand is like essentially like our state manager, and it feels very, very relevant to at least like some of the bugs that exist within honeycombs currently. And possibly even with the graph, we have this tie to GraphQL as well. So that's like our querying language on top of the graph. Now, like, I think I'm going to draw another box here, which I'm thinking is going to be more, again, like more user side, but is going to go through the flow. Like, say you've typed like essentially like our create block like guy here. So this will be like context and then content. So, and I guess we'll have like whatever the like save button is here. So I'm gonna use like a little orange guy and say like kind of once like save is clicked, this is gonna kick off like a whole series of events.
Should we maybe start a little before this process at the authentication layer to get to the
Sure. Can I move this?
Just yeah, you could just select it. Scooch.
I selected the whole thing.
Oh yeah, so I'm not sure how, but we have like this very, very dark giant line that was drawn over the whole canvas somehow. Can't seem to get rid of it. So if you see it, that's what's going on there. It's like I think it's
What is that?
I don't know.
Was it?
Yeah,
I feel like the
it's
eraser
like hiding
tool,
thing. Yeah.
So does
like
this,
you tried erasing, but then it was actually just coloring instead in a movable
think
way.
So yeah.
What the hell was that? It doesn't actually erase?
It's like
That's
whiteout on
weird.
paper or something.
yeah, there's a few of the drawing apps that do this. They like, 'cause it's all vector stuff, and then
It's all
they'll-
layers and layers now.
Yeah, I think I got rid of it.
Sweet. Thank you.
So I guess we have our here instead is the like connect wallet button, right? So maybe like you're saying, John, is we can kind of go through there. So initially, like on this page, just to kind of reiterate, like no content is going to load until a wallet has been connected. So essentially, there should be nothing going on in the background until something is connected. And maybe like I'll even draw like an end state here, and we're just gonna draw off to the right until we get to this end state. And then it'll say like, I don't know, some .eth. Hi. And then this will have like a bunch of like blocks all the way down. So once we actually go and hit this connect button, this is like a way too big marker. Okay, there we go.
I think there's two thicknesses.
Yeah. I just realized that I was on the bigger one.
Yeah.
So once we like click this connect button, I guess the first thing that happens, well, there's a lot of things that are happening that I don't exactly know, but I know what we are doing is we're calling into UseWallet. And this is essentially like going to like underlying, this calls like another library, either EtherS or Web3.js, I think, depending on like exactly who's calling it or something.
I think it within UseWallet, if we're using the gimmicks org library, then it's always Ethers.js.
Always Ethers.js.
Yeah.
Okay. And then underlying, I guess, like if somehow like it theoretically supports Web3.js provider as part of Ethers because they support the Web3 providers.
So basically, there's a Web3 provider, which is like a JSON RPC interface, and then there's a Web3.js library, which does the same thing as Ether. So you could use either or.
Okay.
But the UseWallet just currently uses Ethers because it's a little bit more modern.
Okay. Okay, so it kind of hits Ethers.js, and then Ethers.js like actually itself goes and interacts with whoever your provider is. And the provider, let me actually like pop this out. Provide, I want to do it in a different color too. So the provider is slightly different because like this is whatever's getting injected into your browser. And this could be via MetaMask or Wallet Connect or whoever is actually doing, I don't quite know how to explain it. Maybe Shahruz has a kind of a better idea, but I think there's this like window.ethereum. So anything that's like under Ethereum that's in your browser, like Ethers.js is now going to try to talk to that, and that has like a certain interface as defined. So MetaMask, when it loads, like it's as a browser extension, it's like injecting JavaScript into a page with a bunch of like predefined variables. And Ethers.js is just going to say, okay, like here's the variables like content and how to read and operate and do function calls within that. And that's like I guess, I don't know if that's a JSON RPC interface or some separate interface.
That's interesting. It's basically happening totally locally. It's just like two libraries that are kind of saying, here's our shared state, but that link is happening totally client side, and it's not really doing back and forth communication. It's just loading in everything, but then the actual verification is happening on device.
As far as I can gather.
Yeah.
Shahruz,
So I mean,
Shahruz
the
maybe can
provide basically, so UseWallet is like a high level component that'll make it easy for you to like build a button that'll connect to Wallet. Within that, there's Ethers.js, which is like a high level JavaScript library. It's a little bit more involved, but it gives you all the functionality to like interact with contracts, to interact with the blockchain and read and write to it. But it's just like a language. It's not actually doing the functions itself. It's just like a way of communicating it to your browser. The provider itself, it's something that is what's actually handling all the HTTP requests back and forth with the blockchain. And so like Ethereum nodes and stuff. So the provider, if you have MetaMask in your browser, that's just like the default that you get. Otherwise, Wallet Connect is kind of the standard for how to make it work with the Rainbow or Ledger or any other number of wallet apps. But the job that a provider does is basically managing the communication between your app and your wallet to communicate with the blockchain.
Yep. That makes sense. Kind of doing dash lines for like alternative paths. And did I draw this part right where Web3.js is another interface we could be using here inside of UseWallet?
Yeah, it would involve a fork, but yes, they are interchangeable.
Got it. And so just also to draw like a little nomenclature here, if I'm seeing this right, this is kind of our SDK, although it might kind of be both of these, and then kind of under the same logic, this would be more of like the API, and this is our target of like what we're interacting with.
Yep, that makes sense.
Cool.
Yeah, and I guess like Ethers.js and Web3.js have a lot of like utility functionality. And if you're trying to explore the capabilities of like what's possible with whatever's returned by UseWallet, like in terms of providers, like you start to reference those libraries because they're telling you, here are all the functions that you can do with the wallet once you have it. So I guess I kind of wrote to like, it's kind of like a wallet provider, but it's also an Ethereum blockchain provider. Because how like if I was to connect to a specific Ethereum node myself, like I do run one in my house, so I theoretically could say like I want to connect directly to my Ethereum node and like submit blocks via my Ethereum node or whatever, and so that runs like its own like interface, and this is this JSON RPC. So RPC is remote procedure call, So you're saying like, I'm going to send like this procedure call over to my node, and then it's going to execute that. So that's kind of like what's happening, at least under the hood, as far as I understand.
Yep. Another kind of lens that we can look at this diagram with is that the further right you go, the more power and flexibility you have in terms of like things that you can do. The further left you go, the easier it is to use, but it might be less flexible. Like it'll just be kind of like more user friendly. And yeah.
That's a very nice point.
Layers of abstraction, I guess, is a way to call it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And I guess like once, like as far as we see, like the Ethereum is like actually kind of abstracted here in a way. Like this is kind of in its own like little bubble. We don't actually, for like the purpose of like connecting the wallet, there's no need to talk to the Ethereum blockchain itself. As long as the wallet has already been like stored, it's now like whoever your provider is going to do. So anyhow, so like UseWallet's going to like kind of go all the way down to Metamask or whoever your provider is and say like, do some action. I don't know what this action is, Shahruz, but it's essentially to like say, allow the wallet to be used on this website.
Yeah, you can think of like a wallet being kind of like if your password was stored in a thing and instead of writing it out, you had to like approve one password or a password manager kind of thing. If that makes sense, like it's basically handling all of your authentication, which is what Ethereum needs to do anything. It needs your password to be able to run any operation for you.
It's a bit like two-factor authentication, but it's kind of like the factor.
Yeah.
It's not like a two-step process.
Then this kind of, I don't know how to draw this because now it started like so many things are like happening like under the hood that like get kind of like at the user level, it's like, oh, you're kind of like you're going to get this like approval message. And then you'll confirm that. And once you confirm that, then UseWallet's going to like basically pick up the data and say, here's the provider that you have access to. Here's like the account information. Here's the provider if you choose to submit transactions through. Anything like that. So maybe actually, instead of doing it here, is like, it can almost be like steps.
Well, maybe this layer can kind of get duplicated down here somewhere. And so this sort of stays at the same like level. And we just send the message to this, if that makes sense. So this is kind of time for us. Time is like the going down.
Yeah, it's the vertical axis.
Yep.
Yeah. I was thinking something similar. Maybe the only thing is with UseWallet is it's strange because it's like it's almost like happening in flow reverse. So it's at least like how I would think about it in terms of like the code path is like now all of a sudden we're going to say like in between here, there's like some confirmed dialogue. And then like all of a sudden now like information starts passing back up this like layer of abstraction. So I guess like I'm just gonna kind of do it in the same JavaScript syntax. So this is gonna be like provider account. I don't know what else is provided.
There's a connect and a disconnect function.
Connect and disconnect. And I guess we use the connect function up here. For now, I'm just going to leave it like this.
Yeah.
Whatever. That's fine. Provider and account. And then I guess like how I think about that is like now all of a sudden like this gets injected back into the web page. And all of a sudden like now we have that.
Specifically, the web page is listening for that event, right? And I want to say Ethers.js like generates that signal?
UseWallet. So that within
Wallet.
UseWallet, there are, because UseWallet itself is a React hook, React hooks will re-render any componentry anytime state updates. So it's kind of a nice built-in feature to any React hook.
Got it.
And you can recognize when a React hook is being used because there's a convention of saying use blank for the function name. So use state, use effect. Any custom React hooks tend to follow the same convention, hence use wallet in this case.
So once like that React hook fires, like all of a sudden, like now we have an account that's non-null. So we're like, cool, we have an account and we can display that directly. And then I guess maybe it even makes sense like before the blocks here are defined. Let's see if I can draw this.
I guess, yeah, maybe we could do like a little pseudo mockup state on the left side. I'll move that up.
Thank you. What do you mean pseudo mockup state, or like that's
like
nice?
Kind of where maybe like account here can go from null to
Oh, I see.
Not null. Just like basic key value pairs that changed.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah.
If that makes sense. Kind of
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Especially because that's how React is handling all this stuff, is like state being updated is what triggers everything in React. So showing how the state changes over time probably helps.
Yeah, I don't know if John, you want to mock that up on the side. That would be awesome.
We're good to go.
So I guess in this case, it would just be, I don't know if the provider was already non-null to begin with, but the account is definitely not null anymore.
Yeah, I think provider also starts up null.
Okay.
And in our case, provider is set to Metamask, or is there an underlying name, like, or is it pass through and it's
I guess we can call it a Web3 provider as like the object type that's being stored underneath. But right now, I think we only support Metamask because we haven't configured an infra ID. But once we configure an infra ID, which is just registering for an account somewhere, we'll be able to add in Wallet Connect support right out of the box, which will then support like 24 other wallets.
Awesome.
In gray, I was kind of just saying like maybe what was happening is like now you're at the default homepage, you're logged into the wallet, and finally like the page like fully is loaded. So once the wallet is connected, I don't know how much in depth I should get here. Hopefully the React, I might have to start looking at the code to do this like really effectively to get it very accurate. The high level should be like simple to cover, but the like exact details of how things are getting rendered in React is like another thing.
What we're looking for, at least the level here, is more like inter-library and inter-service communication, not as much within React, because that may change over time as well.
Right.
So that's more of like an implementation detail.
Right.
So like the next step here, I imagine, is kind of like how we're talking to the graph and getting that data back and parsing it.
Right. So I guess the first thing that's going to get triggered here is I want to list the React component that's doing this, but
yeah, the more specificity.
Yeah,
better.
actually that should be okay. So this is our query bar. Essentially, like there's this React hook in the query bar that's going to fire that says like, well, I want to say like, hey, go talk to the graph effectively. And there's a bunch of libraries in between here. So let's see if I think we'll just call it like the GraphQL library for now. And this is going to form a request. To the graph to actually like get some data back. And once that's done, we're actually going to go directly talk to the graph with this data. And the graph is going to say, like, cool, like basically you have some data back from like whatever your query was. And this is actually maybe instead of result, it'll be block because this is really block data. And then finally, that's going to go back and actually like render the page. Actually, before we do that, we'll say that there's like overall like some ZooStand state. So it gets shoved into the ZooStand state. And then once the ZooStand kind of updates everything, it actually goes and renders the page. So like our global component, the main app component or whatever index component is looking at this ZooStand state the whole time. So anytime that state gets updated, it should re-render whatever page you're seeing. So we're just going to update that state with whatever data came back from our query. So we have some default query that happens when the page loads and you have an account that's valid. So that's going to go all the way through and say like, go to the graph, get data from the graph, come back, store it into our like application global state, and then render the page out from that global state.
Sounds right. Yeah, I don't remember if query is set like right at the very beginning or does query change? I don't think query. Oh, it does because we need to put our account ID into query, right? I think query goes from like.
So there's like kind of, I was looking at it today. Man, the query stuff is going to be really interesting. I think right now this is all built into the query bar component. I'm curious like whether we can create like an abstraction language to just like that essentially like takes that string and just feeds it into the SDK and the SDK queries and returns us the results back. That seems like the cleanest interface as opposed to like trying to like hack in or like, it's not really a hack. It's just like not really separated. It's like a lot of like data stuff happening in the query where it feels like it should be more just like pure like view component kind of thing.
Yeah, well, not even view component as much as like it's translating user input into what should be happening.
Yeah.
But the specific parsing of that. So it should really just be worried about like how to parse the colons and make it clear like what's what and like the Discord search bar thing. And then yeah, it generates a string and ships that off. And then like the translation from that string to GraphQL should I think also happen elsewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that's something to think about because I think if once we do that, it'll make the whole page seem a lot like easier to deal with if we can do that properly. Because right now I was even thinking like, oh man, like I'm going to change the query to all, but I also want to remove my test account from that. And there's a way to do that, but like to do that and then also have it be queryable like by author, like how we have it is like, seems like not super trivial, or I don't know enough GraphQL to really make that happen. It seems like almost a query builder needs to happen. So it's like, that'll be like its own kind of unique challenge, I think.
Yep. Should we also kind of mark down like pending or impeding changes? I think one of these is going to be wallet connect over here on the left side. And then I think kind of it's going to be left the tip of the arrow. Basically like search plus search interface. So that's right.
And I guess there's the bug associated currently is still like I guess we can do that when we're doing like the ad block kind of thing. So now this is like, should I copy this? Just that little plus button.
Feels like you guys have done this together before.
We've made a few maps together, yeah.
Okay. So I guess the create block flow, I just added the plus button. I'm just assuming like, oh, I guess I can add like a little drop down here too. I'm just gonna put in text for now because the text and image flow is like virtually the same.
Yeah.
So I think we can just
maybe interesting to maybe like not right now, but also map out that like IPFS upload flow that we built in yesterday. But
yes,
don't know if that's critical in like right now. We can do like just a default text path on the first pass through, and then go back and like fill it in.
Yeah, and I think for the most part, the flows are actually quite similar. Like if you look at the code that I added, I don't even know if upload JSON is actually required. Like most of this can probably go through like mostly exactly the same flow in the SDK side. The only difference is like first you're going to upload an image, get the hash back, and then add it to the content field.
So
like I think
more like an optional like extra step, really at most. Yeah, it's not even a fork in the flow.
Yeah, it could happen. I guess it's kind of a fork, but it's like a pre-processing kind of step almost. So the like main flow itself is staying like very, very intact, I would say.
Nice. Yeah, perfect. Let's follow along.
But we can also, hopefully we'll be able to map out at least a good portion of that flow through here as well. Okay, so our first is kind of, I guess, like again, the initial page. And then the second thing is like, once you've clicked add text block, and I'm gonna make a copy of this guy, copy, paste, cool. And now instead of blocks being here, we're gonna scoot that down, basically say now we have like this new thing. We have context. Make this big enough. Content. Delete this guy. And then we have cancel and save. And this is like essentially our new block. And then like down here, we have our normal blocks going down.
Yep.
So I guess like most of the stuff where you're actually like typing is handled by React, maybe not super like super crazy. It's not really interacting with anything outside of the application. So mostly like, I guess after this is we're also going to assume in this gray block, like maybe actually in the middle, let's do it here. Save is clicked. And this is when things are like actually going to start. What the heck? What just happened? Whoa. Okay.
That's a very cool line.
Yeah, it is like the
like
highlighter.
Registered pressure as like 1 or something. Or highlighter.
No, I used a different brush, I think. But I would I was hoping it was just going to switch color, and then it didn't just switch color. And then this will finally go to our final state, I guess. Which can't I draw it real fast? Might as
You can
well.
drag screenshots in too, I think, if that's of interest to you.
Yeah, I haven't had success with adding screenshots to a canvas. If it like expects an entire screenshot and it makes that the canvas. But maybe I didn't figure out how to do the flow correctly. Yeah. So that's annoying. Like you have to like build your canvas outside of it and then import that as an entire thing.
Hmm.
Otherwise you have like a full screen screenshot. That's a new page.
That's stupid.
Yeah.
If you leave the app and come back in, it shows you like everything getting rebuilt.
Hmm.
Or not
Mm.
rebuilt, but as if you came in from wherever you left off, and then it's kind of doing like a,
That's neat.
yeah,
That is really interesting.
it's kind of fun.
This app definitely gets a few things right that like I haven't seen other apps really think about it. But just like add in a little more hardcore feature stuff. Yeah. Nice tool.
Actually, think. I guess I kind of missed one thing. So one thing up here kind of that's happening is when that I guess like when that clicked add text block occurs, like we need to add something to the ZooStand state to like actually create the like thing that you can type into effectively.
Yeah, I was trying to remember if that's like edit block true or create block, or edit block goes from like new block goes from null to something. I don't remember what the exact state flag on that is.
What all can you go to the VS Code?
Yep, I have that up.
It should be in.
Cool.
I think this is in the header. What's this happening? But I could be
Or
wrong.
new block button.
New block button sounds right.
Prepend block, which is in use block
Yes.
store, which
basically it's this function where you're just giving it. Yeah, so you're just giving it like this block view type. Basically says that they're yeah, if you just do you have the Vim plugin?
Yeah.
If you go to that block view type, I think it's defined in block actually. Yeah, so like basically that has the editing or collapsed and then like some states for IPFS stuff. So effectively like what we're doing is we're creating an empty block, like OS block that has no content, no anything, right? It has like nothing associated with it. And then editing is set to false. And that's what we prepend. So if you go back to that like new block button or whatever, you'll see there should be the creation of some. Yeah, so that block view.
This block view. And the only thing we're specifying is editing true. Yeah.
Right. And block with the author as the account, because I guess that's what we want to like pass through the whole thing. And then the type is either the text or an image in this case. So
yeah,
that's going to be added to the ZooStand state. So basically we say like add empty view, and this goes to like ZooStand. Well, my coloring got very inconsistent now. Does it let me change colors?
it's okay.
Okay, well, it doesn't let me change colors.
Not of drawn things.
Yeah. So I guess that's going to ZooStand, and then that's actually causing like the rendering going on back here to happen. So it's going to just say like, okay, we're going to add this to the top. The ZooStand state is like literally just a list of these views that we're going to choose to render. So the first thing that we're going to choose to render is just this new guy.
Yes.
And then once save is clicked, now a lot more things are going to start happening, I think.
Yes.
So once save is clicked, the first thing that really happens is like we're going to call into the BlockBridge SDK. I should make this. I kind of didn't point this out earlier, but this is
up in the map.
really part of honeycombs. Yeah. So like, I guess this is like constrained inside of our own set of things. And the BlockBridge is the SDK. It's just the name of the SDK. And like specifically, we're going to call a function. I think it's called like create block or add block or something like this. But the first thing that it's going to do is before we can submit anything to the blockchain, we need to generate our JSON structure. So basically on the blockchain, we're just saying like, here's the IPFS hash of our JSON structure, which we defined. Does that make sense?
Sorry, repeat that.
So I think like before we can submit anything to the chain, we need to have this like JSON structure that we're going to point to for the chain. So that's kind of why we're going to IPFS first, make sure that it's on IPFS. Once we get the hash of that JSON object back, we're going to go ahead and like throw that over to the chain and keep track of it there.
Yeah.
So basically we're talking to IPFS first before anything goes to chain.
Yes.
And we could maybe like pass the hash back here and show that that's the only thing that's coming back.
Yeah, so I guess like really we're talking to our own like factory IPFS instance, which we are running as opposed to using Pinata or some other service. But it could be one of those pinning services as well. It's effectively the same thing. And like this factory IPFS, like once it's uploaded, it's going to spit us out some hash. This is going to be the IPFS hash, or I guess sometimes it's referred to as the CID, I think. And then once, what's the best way to do this? Because this is kind of coming back into the block bridge, is like how I think about it, and really what's happening.
So maybe
yeah,
the block bridge could stay on this level.
Yeah, how do you want to draw it?
Here, basically like that, and
okay, yeah, perfect. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. Perfect.
Scoot over the label. Yep.
Cool. So now BlockBridge has that information, and now it's going to say like, cool, I want to actually go interact with the Ethereum blockchain and submit a transaction and do all this business. So one thing that we passed into BlockBridge was the provider, and the provider is what's actually interacting with all of the like things that open Metamask and everything. So UseWallet basically gave us that provider, and now our SDK is going to interact with that provider also directly. So no one has to worry about really setting up the SDK in the sense like all you have to do is give it a provider, and like all of the transaction details and everything gets like worked out by the SDK automatically for the most part. So this is tough because there's another library that we're really using as well.
Which one?
Well, I guess under the hood, like our contracts repo is having a lot of auto-generated code as well as the ABI. So it's like the API for the Solidity contract is like how you would say, or like how you can think. And that's like actually getting imported into BlockBridge, and then also like finally into Honeycombs. I did draw out a dependency tree earlier. I'll share a screenshot of it or the PDF itself or whatever. So hopefully we can keep track of that. Because I know we were talking about like all these dependency things a few calls back when it was like updating like all these repos and all these like modules and everything that like had to spin up.
Yeah.
So I have that already drawn somewhere, as well as like what actions are going to cause what dependency updates. So maybe from here, it makes most sense just to say like, really, once we have that hash, like inside of this block, we're just going to say like, there's not much to do. This is like constructing JSON and then getting the hash back, and then like final block construction. And then we're going to send off that final block to, well, we're going to go through our provider, which in this case is like, again, like Metamask. I mean, really this
is, well, that process is going to encapsulate the signing.
Yes. So it's going to like actually, I guess, from our raw, just like whatever we send to it, is going to like encode it in whatever format Ethereum wants through the JSON RPC spec, and then bring up the wallet in your browser to say like, hey, confirm this transaction. It's going to add the signature once you like go through and confirm the transaction, and then actually send it off to Ethereum.
Yep.
And then this,
hopefully without complicating it, just to add that provider, because it will incorporate like opening up MetaMask or Rainbow and prompting for a signature and stuff. If you choose to set up a wallet without the UseWallet hook that we have, for example, you could pass in a private key and create a provider that way. So what's nice about this is that you can basically like use this same SDK in an automated like backend server running Node.js if it has a private key, and never need to prompt the user for a signature, because that private key is just like pre-signing for everything.
Yes.
So what's nice about like separating these things out is that you keep that option open for anybody that wants to use the SDK.
So in other words, it's possible to just hard code essentially on like a server, a public private key pair here, and just have it like pass through blocks. Maybe if it's like re-encoding things or moving things from like a Web 2 source or something.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. And you're not expected to like emulate user behavior here, because there's like the signatures and the private public key pair is like a totally separate thing from like the human-led verification. That's just, they're not interdependent on each other.
Yeah. So basically like the private key is like, some secure, it's like a key. Either your wallet will be like holding on to that for you, protecting it, and everything has to go through that wallet, and that wallet will twist the key for you and then send the transaction to Ethereum. Or if you want to do something in a fully automated, like, back-end server way where people aren't thinking about wallets or signatures and stuff, that private key can be stored, in which case the SDK can use that private key without the need for like a wallet app, because it has what it needs to be able to sign and then send those things off to the blockchain. So just wanted to point out why it's nice that these concerns are separated, so that UseWallet doesn't necessarily need to be inside of our SDK, even though a number of people probably do want that kind of functionality. Having these things be separate leaves both of those options open, and it's not too much added complexity.
Yeah, that's great to know.
And I guess like this like could have some impact for like how we do things on the front end too. Instead of like having to like confirm each block, you can just say like, we're just going to run a more like traditional web service for ourselves. That's going to just like under like some, like it could be like a multi-sig wallet or whatever, or even just like a normal Ethereum account that we all decide is going to be like the Buzzard NFT holder account. We'll still individually have authorship of whatever. We could incorporate the signing flow like similar to what Shahruz has done on Internet Camera, or we could even just like say like, screw it, like we don't even want to sign things because this is like, it's not so important to sign it. It doesn't need to be super authentic. Like it might be a nice thing to have depending on what kind of message like you're putting out there and whether you want that authorship to be like provable. But if it's not needing to be provable, then like you can kind of just send things like off without anything, and then now the Ethereum testnet just acts as a distributed database.
Yeah, this is the pre-published stuff that we were sort of talking about before. Yeah, and you can. Yeah, go ahead.
Ties into like notions of progressive decentralization as well, where like you have all of the right things in place from the start for a fully decentralized app, but then we're also giving ourselves the flexibility of like, hey, some of these UX things might be terrible, and maybe it makes sense for us to like put in some, a server somewhere that makes some things easier or pre-signs things for us. This enables us to do that without, centralizing the underlying protocol of it. It's just like giving us the ability to do that in the interim if we want. And then also use cases of like, somebody could start setting up bridges and saying like, I'm gonna, enable anybody to input their private key and self-deploy an ingest kind of mechanism from their Telegram or their Twitter, whatever. It would be a good use case for that. Where like, you do want that to be centralized in the sense that you're running a server somewhere, but the underlying protocol is still fully decentralized. It's just a convenience layer that lives on top of it.
It's the squad proxy.
Yeah.
The squad proxy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because basically building that and then trying to move to a fully decentralized like landscape would be very awkward and difficult. This is more like pouring the foundation and then just like covering it up to some extent for now.
Yeah, you're also working in the medium. So like everything is transportable. Like, you can just move it over into, it's sketching. Like it's cool.
I guess this is really like. So I kind of like redrew this slightly. Is once you sign confirm, this is submitting the transaction to Ethereum. At this point, we do have some new information, which would be like the transaction hash, I believe we're going to get out of this. And then this like transaction hash can get piped all the way back into the interface. So that's like, again, like we had those few steps, which would be like IPFS complete, which would have been done like here, this is, let me do gray.
So we can print this stuff into like the history log for each block.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think where there's got to be a way to do this effectively. I think like when the transaction is first submitted, it's like very like easy to kind of handle because the data is like right there in front of you.
Yeah.
But once like you're trying to load the page for the first time, I guess you'll have to go query like some Ethereum blockchain somehow. Maybe this can be exposed via the graph. I'm not 100% sure. But you'll query some Ethereum blockchain, which can tell you like this transaction or this block that this transaction was in was confirmed at some time, and you can put that kind of data in as well.
Yeah.
But exactly like how.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I don't really know.
Okay, so I mean, to the best of my understanding, the transaction hash that we get back is like, it's a long string of characters. We can then look that up on something like Etherscan, like manually within a web browser, and it'll give us a progress bar of like, here's where it's expected to be confirmed in 45 seconds or 10 minutes or whatever, depending on kind of gas and all that. So that transaction hash is something that we can look up, but it doesn't get stored. None of that gets stored into the graph until that transaction is actually executed and completed and confirmed. And once it is confirmed, at that point, we'll also get back a token ID or a block ID, which is like the individual ID that's referencing the block that we just submitted, which is, I think through the current system, just like an incrementing ID starting at 0.
Yep.
So the 20th thing that we post is going to be indexed 19 or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we are not storing the transaction ID, right? We really only hold on to that in local memory while the browser is open, and we're like waiting for, so in other words, if somebody submits and it goes off to IPFS and the transaction gets closed, and we close the browser window, reopen Buzzard, authenticate, and the two transactions haven't been confirmed yet, we won't actually know how to look up those confirmations until the block actually finalizes and shows up through the Graph API, and only then. So I guess there's that like potential small edge case where somebody refreshes or logs out or logs in at that moment where we wouldn't really be able to tell them where their block is. But in theory, that period of time will be reduced down to 2 seconds, and over a longer period of time, we could just shove that like queue into local storage and say, oh hey, like here's the pending blocks that you have going on.
Yeah.
And that's what your modal would be kind of reading from and displaying.
ZooStand has like a nice persist plugin, so that'll automatically anything that you store in the ZooStand will get synced with local storage. So the next time you open up your browser, your state will be exactly as you left it the previous time. So you can configure ZooStand to just like persist between sessions that way. So I think storing transaction history is a really nice thing for that.
Yep. Makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Definitely, and it should be like relatively easy to implement, at least like looking at how persist was used for like how you did it in resolving ENS names and making sure not to query the inferior like URL like a billion times because of that.
Yeah.
Cool. I added just like a little, I think John maybe drew a little bit too, is like basically now we're just waiting for the transaction to be confirmed, and finally like that'll be another like thing that slightly modifies the state. And other than that, like that's kind of what's happening in this more like visual flow. Hopefully that encapsulates everything. That makes sense. I don't know
so.
if there's things that are missing. There might be some things that are missing, but
I think we've kept our surface area like very low to the point where like this is basically the whole flow for reading and writing. Edit is going to be different. Obviously, publish is going to be its own thing that we really haven't laid out yet. But I think as far as what we have right now, this looks pretty comprehensive.
I think the one extra step here is the graph indexing it after the transaction has been confirmed. But that's kind of happening externally, and then that will, when that happens, that will trigger our query on our front end to update with the new data. So basically, based on the current setup, we're never reading block information from the blockchain directly. We're always waiting for it to get indexed on the graph, which happens within like milliseconds of it being confirmed. And then when that happens, it'll update on our end. So the transaction like hashes here, we're really just kind of using as like receipt management and just kind of like order history kind of format stuff. It's not containing the content necessarily of what we're looking at, but it's more like proof that something has been submitted in a way to track it. It's like an order number in like an e-commerce app or something.
Yeah, that's I think maybe that's where we can show some sort of connection from the graph here and that final GraphQL query and that loop. Yeah, because basically like this part is not our data. It's only sort of like a confirmation of the data. But then down here we have our query bar blocks and
yeah, because I think at least as current, we're not requerying, we're just assuming that data. But it kind of makes sense to requery as well.
Well, hold on a second. how is that? How are new blocks showing up right now? Where is that
It's
trigger?
getting, again, it's the kind of ZooStand state, but I think actually the ZooStand state here is not hooked up properly, and that's what's causing the double add bug. Is like
Got
it's
it.
really only in React's local state as opposed to ZooStand's like global like state.
Mm,
So it's like that component state is knows what's going on, but ZooStand has no idea. So there's
Yep.
this like mismatch between the two, and it's like causing this thing. But maybe it would be good to draw in like along these arrows that I had before. It would be kind of like updating ZooStand state as well.
mhm.
Yeah, I wonder if our like ZooStand block state manager should also be looking up like duplicate IDs. And if there's
Yeah.
ever a duplicate, just update the existing record and help fill it out instead of creating a new record within the array.
Totally.
Yeah. I think I was trying to solve this problem a while back, and I did end up writing a function that does that. I don't know if ZooStand by default has something like that helps with that or not. Okay.
Not that I know of. I think
Yeah,
it's still just like doing a find index or find within the array.
Okay, yeah, because that's what I did is I think I added like something to the query or something that allows like some level of indexing, and then being able to go say like, yes, this matches, so just update that record.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think like the block ID or the IPFS hash might be what's good for that. Because the block ID we may not necessarily know while we're in like draft or edit mode, right?
Mhm.
Because it might be that two people have composers open.
Yep.
You can't assume that you're going to be the one that's getting the next
Yeah.
one because the other person might submit before you.
Yeah. And IPFS we can hash ourselves locally, and it's going to be unique. So
yeah,
that'll be stable throughout. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess there could be an edge case with the IPFS hash, in the sense like if you were doing an edit on a block, it's going to get a new IPFS hash. So you'll have to be able to maintain the old hash, look up the old hash, and then essentially change it. But other than that, I think
that's kind of where our parent field is going to be. So one might think that this logic just gets baked into whatever's interfacing with ZooStand, and is like so before looking up the ID for deduplication, also check if there's a parent and check all of the past iterations of this block and their IDs. So yeah, that like flow is a little hazy, but using the parent and assuming that we have all the associated blocks, then we should be able to reconstruct all past hashes and duplicate on that.
I think that seems like the right approach to me as well, since we're already encoding it. It makes perfect sense to kind of be looking at that as well. Also, I'm curious with this ZooStand stuff, if it also makes sense to kind of create our own React hook library similar to UseWallet here, to make it just like easy for someone to like throw up a new UI without having to worry about like block state management and things like this. Is to just be like, here's the interface to like update blocks into your web page, and have a like solid interface behind it. So I think that's something that can also be pulled out at some point as well.
Use blocks.
Sorry?
Use blocks.
Use blocks. Nice.
Yeah, I love thinking in terms of like the SDK, like what is the line of code that somebody's going to write, and then use blocks and then some optional like, filtering or sorting kind of parameters that you can toss into that function call. But just knowing that it's a one-liner, ultimately, it's really nice.
Yeah, I think getting practice with these kind of like flows and everything, and like building components is also very interesting. It's like running into this, even though like the like node version thing, I'm like, oh man, like these are things that I never like would normally think about.
Yeah. It's but I guess that's why we're running in it into it now, and we're going to try and reduce like the area of complexity down, so that somebody
Yes.
coming into this is just like really dealing with shit on one dimension, and it'll be like integrating with their project in JavaScript or TypeScript, and that's it.
Yeah, because I think it would be, I'm pretty excited, like even for like the little stupid like app that I built for my own stream is like I can totally build it into this, and instead like I can run the back end with my private key or whatever and just do it, right? And now all of a sudden I have like a custom block producer app, and it should be pretty simple.
Yeah.
Fun stuff.
Yeah.
Indeed.
1 billion blocks by Christmas is the goal.
This reminds me of the first program I really ever wrote, which was like on the TI-83 calculator while I was like in high school or like some class, and it just added one. It was just added one and printed it out, and it's like that's 1 billion blocks right there. It's just add one and send it out.
There you go.
Or we'll just get some Web3 influencers on. Let them
hammer away.
Yeah, I'm very curious like how the publishing side of this is going to evolve, because I want to write in it. I'm starting to have things where I'm like, okay, like here's things that I want to write into it.
Yeah.
There's just no interface. Like the block at the most fundamental level, like it needs another abstraction in interface to really make like usable, I think.
Yeah.
Like in terms of like, can I just type markdown text and have it be converted into a bunch of individual blocks, or does it stay one block?
Yep.
And like, I guess it's like at what granularity do you want your document to be saved? And maybe that's even options where you're like every paragraph create a new block versus like the whole thing is just treated as a single block.
Yeah. I mean, it's back to that like chat interface too. Can you just write to yourself in blocks and spit them out or whatever, and then that produces a whole page? Or do you have just like a full canvas, like bear style or whatever? I mean, all of them should be doable, but yeah.
We also still have that right page in the nav, which I don't know if that's out of date now, because we have that UI in the corner.
I think maybe we can like just take that out of the nav, but we can leave the component and stuff there. This is a nice little scaled down toy, but it's a little confusing now because you write on home and you write through right. So I'll add that in.
Yeah, I think we'll probably replace that with whatever our post surface is going to be. And that'll give us our first sort of at least one facet of the collaborative aspect of it. Like, and there's probably a combination between like posting into or creating blocks into that post page, and then we have to create other posts. There's a bunch of like sort of things that we can work out. But yeah, I'm very curious about how the edit and like ingest, all of that folds into one interface. Like, do you open up a post and you like start sticking stuff in there, or is it, I mean, that's one path. And so you have collaborative editing in one surface, or are you adding them separately, ingesting them into some like organizational thing, and then, pipelining them into, all of these things are viable. It's just sort of what's easiest to experiment with. I really do like having inputs all over the place, though. But yeah,
that feels important.
For the post composer, do you have like a favorite or a preference out of all those different options?
This is kind of it's more. I have a picture of one that can work. Our basic model where you just select something, it goes into a post, and then you can reorder them. Like that's the simplest thing, and then like publish multi-sig, whatever. That's the like most toy-like version of the thing that I can come up with, because otherwise, there's probably overlaps and, like buckets that you need to put things in to move them, so Yeah, I haven't
Yes
figured
and
anything.
no. Like I'm also seeing a version here where if we manage to redraw like state in a very, very, very timely manner, in the sense that as soon as like somebody has made an edit, it shows up on other people's screens in like real time without requiring refresh, which should be reasonably possible with the graph plus GraphQL
Sure.
plus like state management. Then like because our post is just a query that's like saying give me all blocks that are checked, like
Yeah.
that really is the bucket, and we don't really need an intermediary like staging area for them. So that in theory there could be one or two people like digging around deep in the queries somewhere and clicking
Yeah.
checkboxes on and off. And there could be somebody like hammering away at like a that sort of dynamic text box input thing at the bottom of the post page. And they should both just stream into the bottom of the document, like because everything has a time and everything just reacts to like user input. Like basically, the more inputs that we have, like I don't necessarily think we have to worry about piping too much because everything is like this very fast loop query as opposed to like I'm submitting things, I'm like selecting things and then submitting things, which feel so. In other words, every item that you like touch or every click is more or less propagating instantly, as opposed to the Web 2 style where you're like filling out a form and then clicking save, and then that's going out and doing things and doing conflict resolution. Then you get back to your new state. So as long as we keep to that model, like things should sort of fly right past each other without causing too much conflict.
Is that before or after it gets, so each edit though is getting encoded to the blockchain, right?
Yeah.
So you would be able to show state changes before that, is what you're saying? Because if you were,
yes.
okay,
So
interesting.
that I think we can do by more or less having a like lightweight communication channel that's squad level. Maybe something peer-to-peer that's just bouncing these confirmation transactions around. Maybe there's a way of like synchronizing some level of the ZooStand state across like the squad as well, based on
Interesting. That's really interesting. Okay.
yeah. So
Yeah.
super thin and just like lightweight, but very fast.
Cool.
Yeah,
So
based on like how responsive the environment is, like that sort of dictates a lot of what we can do or what we want to do.
Definitely.
Yeah, and then there's also like because there's sync sessions and async sessions is the way I'm thinking about it. And I was sort of defaulting to async, slow and chunky because we know that we can solve for that.
Probably
and
more
then
like that anyway.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, there are times where it's possible that we're all in. I mean, and also if you have a lot more people working on something, the likelihood that you'll have more people in the So yeah, all of those use cases, I have no idea. Like, and then what the idealized or aspirational like method of composing these things are, I'm not sure. There's like a layer. I think we'll start hitting this once we get into the post screen. Like, I mean, I can see, like how much identity information is on the page, as you're working with it, like how much is necessary. Like right now we have a ton of redundancy in the blocks. So they're pretty heavy. So I don't know. I'm sticking to my click it and put it in there, and then we'll figure it out from there.
Now, what would happen if in theory people edited the same block at the same time? I mean, I don't know if that's like physically possible. Like one person would just be first and one person would be second. Is that how it parses? Like this is a worst case scenario. It's like two people. Yeah. It wouldn't like blow
there's
up.
No like
it's like,
it's not like merging or anything.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So like if someone like completely like it said like hello there, and someone could just completely say it in like flowers, and then the other person says like hello there Bob, and it's like whoever like gets there
just flips
it like skips one. Yeah.
That's at least what I'm imagining is going to happen.
There is a question of what happens if they're both within the same like blockchain block, because on the like not our version of blocks, but within the blockchain, there's basically like blocks happening, on intervals. On Polygon, it's every couple seconds. On Ethereum, it's like every 30 seconds or whatever. When that happens, there's basically a bunch of transactions that get pulled into that block. The Ethereum miners are basically running all those transactions, updating the state of the blockchain. So if there's two transactions editing the same thing, it's going to complain about one of them, and it's not necessarily clear which came first or second.
Interesting. It would have to fork almost, if anything. But
Yeah.
it wouldn't do that.
Sure.
It might reject both.
Yeah.
In fact, I think that's most likely based on my understanding of how that stuff works.
I'm curious, like, would that happen, or is it just now like an ordering of transaction that happened?
But if
like
you're
essentially
both...
like it could be either order, just depending on which miner actually chose the order for those blocks.
To my understanding, everything included within a block is happening at the same time. There's no order of transactions that are grouped within the same block. So for that reason,
can't modify the same state twice.
Yeah.
No,
my
well, because
intuition
if
is
one
that
person edited one block and got in before the other one, that block doesn't exist. It's already been like moved forward, right? So you wouldn't be able to like to whoever.
Well, you could edit that, because what it's doing is basically saying, look up the block that is block ID 7 and then give it this new IPFS hash. So because block ID 7 is still block ID 7, even if there was an edit in the preceding like blockchain block, that lookup and update will still trigger. But I think the specific case of two people submitting within like milliseconds of each other or within the same, time frame, that then get pulled into the same like transaction pool that constitutes a blockchain block. I think it's going to reject both, because this stuff is designed to be deterministic and like everything should be replayable with the same result. So I don't think it would prioritize one over the other. Because internally on the blockchain, there's no concept of like, this is the time that this transaction was submitted. It's just, this is the time that the blockchain is processing this transaction. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I guess we can see if we run into this one.
I'm very curious to like almost like create this scenario and see what happens.
Yeah, me too.
Like, it would be fun.
Like especially in the arena of like trying to get things on the same block, and then like what. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know enough about how Ethereum is architected itself and how like the blocks are actually like formed, or how the VM works. Like I could see how it doesn't reject it, but it also depends on like how the VM is like created. Because I guess at the end of each like Ethereum transaction, like you have a new world state, but I don't know if that's happening at the block level or at the transaction level.
I think it's happening at the block level.
Sounds
like
my
understanding, because it also,
makes
if you think about our use case here is publishing, which has certain risks associated with it. But if the primary use case within Ethereum is like financial transactions and DeFi stuff, they probably wouldn't design for like questions like this to arise with unpredictable output. They would probably just reject both outright, based on my understanding of their design philosophy around this stuff.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, Shahruz.
Because what if you spent your Ethereum twice in two different contracts within the same block? You shouldn't be allowed to double spend, right?
Yep.
Well, I mean, actually, it would still. I think theoretically, like, that could still happen in the sense like it would be different ETH that's getting spent still, in both. And if your balance is not high enough for one, it depends again. Like if there's a linearized order within the block. And if there is an order within the block and it's just up to whoever's creating the block to determine that, then like theoretically, like it could still be processed, because now like you're not, I'm assuming it's single threaded. Like they're not trying to do like some complicated multi-threading thing within Ethereum. It's just like a very simple, like single threaded like CPU. They're not trying to like do branch prediction or anything like crazy. So I can imagine
see it going either way there, actually.
Yeah. I think
because each transaction is so small that multi-threading it would make some level of sense. Like run 8 transactions at a time and just execute all of them until that transaction pool is finished.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not sure. This would be a fun thing to play with and see what happens.
Yeah, part of what I'm curious about here is like, so this is the nature of the like medium, right? Like it's the style of paper, right? Like when you interact with it, it has a texture, and certain types of things are, you can't write on top of each other, or whatever. Or you can, and it produces a type of result. So yeah, it's hard to predict with this. And then I'm curious, like, I've never really done like co-editing of the same text, like on top of another person. It's just never happened. Like, you're usually in a document, and then you, like what we're doing here, like this is the closest thing where we're building something together, but you're not really writing over each other. You're writing around each other. And so this also may be because I haven't done a lot of this, so I don't know.
Well, an app like this has, the way that it works is there's a co-presencing, so you can see in real time. Yeah. And like, this is for like bigger writing projects. Like if you use like Google Docs is a good one for this. You can see like it's the co-presencing, and you know that someone's editing it. It happens in writing. You'll see someone, like we were doing this earlier, Dave, in Apple Notes. I could see you writing and where you were writing. Understand. So do we need to, I mean, I think part of the question here is that part of what we're building into? Yeah. Is that part of the medium thing? Yeah.
So that potential WebSockets layer we're talking about, that's where all of that co-presence stuff becomes very, very, very simple, because you just like see little cursors next to particular blocks, or you see the actual cursor in the editor. It's a little more complicated, but possible. Or blocks that are being edited just changes into a slightly different shade while they're being edited. So you know, maybe that's all the feedback that's sent. It doesn't block you, it doesn't stop you, but it just kind of says, hey, somebody's looking at this right now. That makes sense
to me, because it doesn't feel like we're doing
check-in, check-out,
because it doesn't feel like we're doing a thing where they're like the speed sort of thing where we all need to be in at the same time. This is not like, we're not designing a high stakes sort of like.
I mean, that can be a mode. Like, you know, it'd be fun to build something ridiculous like this to see like how fast you can, or like what level of co-op you can do, you know.
If the WebSocketing allows for, you know, showing a different like shading, it could also lock you out if you're not the one editing. Like I'm assuming there's different things you can like, so there's extensibility there, which is nice.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I think just getting the stuff into a surface and then feeling what it feels like, and then what we can do with that will sort of, I think, appear. Like, like we'll probably have the idea that we want to do something, and then we just need to figure out an affordance to do that. Just continue to go with the grain. Yeah, and so my methodology on this is just like whatever simplest building blocks we can get into the page so that we can feel the next thing without trying to guess too much. Because there are some patterns here that like
they'll emerge.
Yeah, we'll leave them. Yeah.
Yeah. So the post surface is sort of like the post itself. That is still a low-hanging fruit, right?
Yeah, actually, I mean, I don't know why I didn't put that into the building channel unless we did, but really that's just a separate page with a pretty lightweight query that's just running and printing out these blocks. So feels relatively defined in terms of like how to build it.
And then editing the blocks, right? Because we don't have that.
Where are we planning on storing? Or God.
Yeah, just editing. We I think almost have mapped out. It would be good to like do a session like this where we draw it out and test our assumptions, but I think we're pretty close there. What were you going to say?
Where are we planning on storing the true or false kind of value of if something is included in a post or not?
Yeah,
we can do the checkboxes on the page.
I was going to ask the same thing.
Yeah. should that require? So right now we can toggle a checkbox that's on the page, but that's just in our browser on whoever's got it open. We can sync that to the blockchain at some point. Like maybe it's that you check a bunch and then there's like a save button at the bottom, and then that triggers like a signature prompt and a confirmation. That's one way of doing it. You could also do it on each one. We could also just set up like a database somewhere that's, you know, Web 2 style. number of ways.
This is where I'm
Yeah.
wondering if we can do like this, start touching this intermediary, like lightweight database that's only shared between us at the squad level.
That makes
It's
sense.
not as like, so I mean, maybe there's some sort of automated synchronization process that's running and syncing it to Ethereum, or assigning a signature to Ethereum like once every 6 hours, 12 hours, I don't know.
That's cool.
But I think for the most part, it should be very like touchable. It should be very easy to write and read from, pretty cheap. And I think part of it might be WebSocket communication. Part of it might look just like a very typical like Postgres database. I think I've kind of vaguely seen some solutions for this where you like you really just do host it peer to peer, and it's relatively painless. Could be an interesting research session, but I think that's also where maybe drafts can go, and like some of our other features where they were kind of like, they're not critical to put on chain right away, but they're going to make it there eventually. And so it's just making it cheaper to change their state up until that point.
Yep.
Yeah, this is like the squad notebook or squad journal layer. It's like, I see it as an equivalent to like a wallet. It's a similar entity in that sense.
Totally.
And you have, you're in a trusted environment that has been like built I mean, there's a bunch of stuff that you can do with that, the multi-sig stuff, or some ritual or some kind of thing, or tokenizing access to it. And then within that environment, you have like more real-time or like handshaken like centralization kind of stuff. Yeah, I like that a lot. That's cool.
What's also, I mean, what I kind of secondary benefit here of us setting up a Postgres together is if we go with this tooling, there's a library called Prisma that I think has like the absolute best querying interface, like super flexible, super TypeScript friendly. So it's like doing autocomplete and guiding you down these happy paths and stuff. So if we go down that route, it'll be nice to be like, learning from that and seeing if there's any patterns that we might want to adopt for our own query language.
Yeah.
Where's query builder? Cool.
And they make Postgres like a pleasure to work with, which is nice.
Yeah, and then it's, once all that stuff is in like this pseudo post or whatever, pre-published post, then it's the act of that publish event or whatever we're going to come up with there can push it out into something that's more, and then how mutable that thing is, or versionable, or what, that's another discussion, I guess.
Yeah, I was just to point on that, like I have, at least in my mind, I have been moving a little less from like we are making a PDF to we are making something that can be like versioned into a PDF and verified that like this is what it looked like at this point. But based on like the social graph stuff in here, for it to work, or I guess for it to have full benefit, it feels like these things do need to be more on the living document side of things rather than like this is a book that's published. I guess the difference from a book is that like you can rewind and just look at like, well, what did it say at this time? Who said that, basically? But like I just because I think Mirror or somebody or even like Baodao, like when I download a PDF from them, I'm just like, why is this a PDF? I get like, I like the fact that there's like the self-contained artifact that has everything and no dependencies that need to be like that potentially are missing. But then it's like, was there really nothing changed or rephrased since then that would like aid in my understanding of this? And like, why? What is the time delay for that to get out?
The way I see the benefit of the PDF or the form of that is that it's tradable and sendable, and like you have one in your library and it feels substantial in that sense. But the NFT thing gives you this like, plus version history, plus all of that other stuff, and it's living in that sense.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's nice to have like a little bit of a snapshot in a way, because if everything is always mutable, like you could see things in real time. Yeah. That's interesting
little
though.
crazy too.
Like it's sort of like a editions of a book almost or something where you're like the first edition was like this and it sort of stands on its own, but it's still living. It's still doing stuff. And it is cool if you could see with the first edition even how it got to be in that state if you cared. Like that would be a lot of work to go look at it all, but yeah. PDFs feel old though.
They do, but I think what we're proposing here is that there's going to be lots of PDFs. It's just that at the very top, there's going to be like a generated on and like from, and you can take those two values and plug them into like some sort of lookup thing, and then you get like the thing like on-chain, trusted, verified from which it was generated. And then you have all of the benefits on both. Because I like PDFs in the sense that once I have a PDF on my computer, I'm like, you're not.
Oh, you know you have it.
Yeah. Like, put it on my like offline reader and like go into the forest and it'll be there. So I by all means I love like them as a digital sort of artifact. I just usually when people create PDFs, they're like, this is my version 1 PDF, and then maybe you could check back in 6 months and see if I've updated, but I'm not gonna really tell you why I changed things, or the old version is going to disappear. Like if you sort of make the generation of them more transparent, I think that's where it gets like there could be many PDFs, but they're all like it's easy to point to a particular version and existence of that PDF.
There's I don't know. There's probably other like forms of this thing that are like PDF adjacent, you know, some things that are more mutable and more changeable and, you know, and things that are more like books. But this is another,
a Web 2 portal like that I think has different feelings associated to it. And even right now, Web 2 is like, on the other hand, when I go to a Web 2 page, I'm like, well, who changed this? When did it change? Can the people change it? Like, it's like the whole, it's like totally opposite side of the spectrum. So I think this would be a really interesting place to explore.
Yeah, so then it's like the pre-publish environment needs to support the creation of the forms, you know, like and the closer you can get to the meat of how the thing will initially like be inevitably like consumed or digested or whatever, the more that you can work within that form, you know, the closer you can be to the actual act of the thing.
Preview.
I think that there are a bunch of weird, like natural tendencies to things that are made with blockchain substance that we haven't uncovered yet. Like we have to like build the lens so that we can see how it reacts in environment. So we're still there. This is one of the frustrations that I kept having because I keep wanting to design cool stuff. Like, but this is the level of design we're at. Like, you know, piping that this goes from here to here, and this is, and that is starting to show the grain of the sort of paper, I guess. This has been super helpful in understanding how this stuff is coming through, and then like where it's responsive, what information is being responded to, so that I know it's an affordance thing. Like, you know, when I draw on this thing, it feels like this is our felt sense layer. And then what needs to be exposed at all? Like, you know, like in the new block process or whatever, like, you know, how granular do you need to understand what is happening behind the scenes to actually make this thing work, and what can be abstracted? It's like, I love doing this stuff. It's been fun to watch this.
Glad to hear.
Yeah, me too. Because this is like how I naturally work. Before I even write code, I always try to draw things out, because that's how I mentally build a model of what's happening anyway. And without it, like I literally just will look at a piece of text editor forever.
Very useful, like loop breaker.
This like the style of doing like UI stuff is, I call it choreography, because it's effectively what it is. And you know, it'd be interesting to take this and then like, because the responsive part of the interface, the stuff that is happening behind the scenes that can be spit out, but like I usually don't know what it is. I have to infer it or guess or ask. This is I don't know. I like this process. It's cool.
I think it would be interesting also I don't know quite how this would work. I'm imagining it can though. Like as you're designing something, I think a lot of the times, like as you're saying something, I'm creating like a mental model of how like that can fit into the existing system as well. So I don't know if like there's like some parallel like activity where it's like two sides of the plane is like design on one side and then like because we kind of essentially did that here, but I think it can also be done probably even more live, in the sense instead of like looking back at something that already has been built, is more like here's how this thing theoretically can be built, and then that also builds a map of how it can be implemented in code and from design in parallel.
Yeah, having a sketch surface like this while we're going through this stuff, I think is really helpful. Like the ability to sketch, like when we're in these, like at least when I'm doing the design stuff, like the Figma thing is great and all, but it's too clunky. It's
too clunky. Yeah.
No, I actually think about it in the other sense. Like, it's not that it's clunky, it's like too precise. The lines are too straight. The boxes are too, the 90-degree corners are too like, I'm like, I'm not at that level of confidence about the model in my mind. I want like the wavy, crappy, shitty, like pen marker, really.
Yeah, it's too formal. It is too formed. So there is a level of thinking that is, there's a spectrum on informality to formality, I guess. Which interesting.
Yeah, so maybe this is at least in part one way we can do the next design sessions where we're all doodling on here and like maybe doing some interesting stuff where we're like scrolled to different parts and then sketching out like 5 variations of it, and then we scoot like
I think that's
things
good.
into the same place and make little games out of it, because all of these surfaces at the end of the day are just going to be easily translated to IPFS into blocks. Like all like just sequencing and authorship, all like so it'll be great.
We're making our hypermedias or holographic medias.
Well, I'm curious too, like, I don't know if you just said this, but having a code editor open at the same time, like jumping back and forth, I think will be that much easier.
Man, I didn't even think that far, honestly. I was just thinking of drawing the blocks like this, but having a code editor extends it even one level further.
Yeah. Well, you're sharing a brain. Yeah, it looks like this, and you're like, I don't get it. And Dave's like, I don't know, like sort of like this, and it's on the thing, and you're just like, oh yeah, okay, like, yeah.
I'm gonna need more screens.
Yeah.
I don't know if Soup supports this. We're gonna have to figure out like this is.
Yeah, so we're essentially starting to propose like, well, at least the code might be in a replit like environment, so that might kind of be its own thing, and then video is like omnidirectional, but then we are sort of proposing like multi-channel communication.
Yeah, I was just thinking YouTube has like multi-channel support. You can like switch between the things in real time, I think.
For all the sports stuff, right?
Yeah, so you could probably do overlapping feeds, and then they would be time synced.
Yeah.
So that
we're gonna need like someone. This is turning into a real broadcast production.
Great.
Fun.
I mean, that would be really cool.
That would be pretty cool.
Like someone's like on Scribble Together, and then someone's code editor, and then someone, I guess could have the
someone pressing
local hosted thing, like so you could just be like, okay, show me what it looks like after it's been programmed. Show me the code. Show me the original design.
We're
gonna need somebody live being like, switch to camera 1, switch to screen 2,
and go. That's the pro. That's the fancy event version of that. You have an in-house live director. I just like the idea that if you have somebody like, Kristen's doing notes in real time as this comes through, and then you have the audio feed or whatever, you can sort of switch between what might help you better understand and do replay in different media.
That's interesting. Actually, if you could choose your own adventure kind of thing. Like, I want more of this, minimize that, turn the volume up here.
Post
Yeah.
direction, I guess.
Even be able to like move the little feeds around. Like you can have like
Yeah.
a bunch of small ones if you really want, and then like here's the main one, and then just boop, boop, boop,
Yeah.
and everyone. Oh gosh, that's too good. I like that.
Yeah.
Instead of someone having to direct it, it's just now you're the director yourself.
Yeah.
Or someone can choose to be a director for many people if they want to. Just like more community is like, hey,
Yeah.
you're the curator of this like live feed that all of these are put out now. So good luck.
It's
Yeah, I
like
think
another
it's-
query kind of viewer thing.
Yeah.
Totally. Just a
So
live
you could-
thing, basically.
Yeah, you could do post like production directing and have that be like the official, like, you know, we're putting this out, but you can make your own, like you can have it look how you want.
Mhm.
Yeah, this keeps just going back to whenever I see videos uploaded to YouTube and like I see code and I'm like, I can't
Yeah.
get it out.
Yeah.
Like I'm transcribing code here and it's 2021.
Yeah, you want to copy and paste it?
Yeah, this just gets there. It's like you can download, you could like watch a session as you walk outside over audio, or you can watch it on a screen, or just follow along in your code editor, whatever feels most natural in that moment.
Yeah, again, it's just go to the media that makes the most sense for your like particular thinking, because that's the multi-perspectival thing. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the other part of this is like, all right, so we do one of these events, it produces a bunch of blocks. They come into like a post environment, and then this, you know, then you do post production on that thing and then move it to publish.
Yeah.
That's a more like natural, like that, like enacted method of like thinking together synchronously or something like this. And then you have the asynchronous version of this where you are like doing sort of separate work and bringing it together into an environment. Yeah.
Synchronously async.
Sure. I mean, in the sense that you are a part of a squad, and the squad is synced in purpose, at least, or something. Yeah. But not temporally synced, but maybe, it's a...
Okay, one other thing that's starting to like circle around me is the fact that a published event is not like, a block doesn't end its life when it's published. It's merely like assembled next to other blocks for some period of time. Yeah. And
it's an event.
It creates a waypoint, sort of a place for, it's like a higher signal connecting like map to other nodes, but that node is absolutely, the individual like little blocks within there are absolutely going to continue their little lives and get like, you know, sent into all sorts of different areas. And then the next time they're published again, there's like a link between these two published events, even if you ignore all the stuff that happened in between, like at the lower level, and you just follow along on those like higher level maps.
Yeah, it's this. I mean, the history thing keeps popping up with this. Like, you know, you're developing timelines, right? And then the publish events are like a method of consensus reality. And in particular, if it's multi-sig, then you have a group of people who are agreeing on this consensus reality and then putting it out into the world, and then there's, you know, some feedback cycle on that. But yeah, then having the blocks be mutable within it so that the next reality can better reflect what we're all trying to live in or whatever. So, or a complete fantasy, whatever. That's fine too.
It's a shared fantasy. It's better than a solo fantasy.
These 5 people believe in this.
This is where they went wrong. Like, you can go back and find where they forked reality, and they had only just, you know, worked it out back there. Yeah. I mean, getting to the post surface, I think, is our next big like understanding here. Like, we'll have a feel for a bunch of stuff there. Also being able to operate the queries and then like have that feedback cycle.
Somewhere in that, my mind went off on a tangent a little bit, and I may have figured out a hack for really decreasing gas fees on some of these things. You said something about it's just emitting events, which made me think like, if blocks themselves don't necessarily have the permanence or the status of a full post, you know, like if they're not necessarily equivalent, what if you could call a function in Solidity and like you include the IPFS hash as like data there, and you emit an event from Solidity, but you don't necessarily store it. The graph can listen for the events and store them. So because you're not storing it on the blockchain, and because it doesn't necessarily need the full OpenSea, you know, compatibility, you might be able to save a whole lot on gas fees that way. But just that's like a weird,
you're still
experiment.
routing information through a very like solid channel, and basically if it makes it into the open graph, it means that it has like by nature gone through this pipeline and been like touched by these interfaces, but there's no reason to record every block right away. It's more about the publish event that like really requires that.
This is the thing I've been hard. This makes so much more sense because it feels like
cheaper.
It's looser, but in the environment. Like the cheapness is part of the like.
But
it's
more
informal.
in the sense that it's lower cost. Like I don't have to, like I'm not as hesitant to click the publish button. It's like it's just like a little brainworm. I just put it in there and I'm not costing anybody anything.
Yeah. I like that. That's cool.
And then the post itself becomes a little bit more elevated because then that gets the full storage, the full NFT status.
You were formalizing it in that sense. Like it is achieved form Solidity. Yeah. I'm like, that's cool. Yeah.
This also definitely works better with some sort of intermediary like WebSocket layer, because if something's listening to the graph and like these events are flying around in every direction and nobody's like worried too much about like waiting for transactions until at the point that you are waiting for transactions, everybody's okay with waiting like a minute because it's going to be a pretty significant event. That may even add to its significance in some sense.
So then you get the feedback cycle where you're like, okay, it's going out, and then there's something happening, and you can put some visualization on that, and then when it hits, it's in the world, right? The pre-publish, post-publish, I like all that. That's great.
I don't know if this is going to work for sure, but theoretically it should, because all the event listeners and the event emitters and stuff are set up the right way. It might be fun to just experiment with and see if it's possible, because it might work. Yeah,
this is very interesting. I think my brain went off on a similar tangent. I got distracted as well. Slightly different, because I was hearing about Solana earlier. So I think I was trying to solve the problem by using a different blockchain entirely. Is how do we keep it decentralized? But I guess Solana is like 400 millisecond block time. So it brings us almost to like near real time. So that's like maybe a slightly different solution, but maybe also like it in a way it could be like something that's like less solid, whereas Ethereum, the publish is still like everyone is using
the main event,
and this is like the big thing. Solana is like leading up to it and like everything that's there. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think kind of going at some of the similar ideas. So there's definitely something there.
Do you know if Solana has a bridge or is planning on having a bridge so you can move assets to Ethereum and back?
Great question. I have no idea. Definitely should do some research.
Yeah, I know somebody building a Solana wallet, and I've been sort of ambiently keeping up with their press. They're raising a bunch and they are going to support Ethereum in their wallet, which it's moving in it, and likely there'll probably be some stuff that they raised like $9 million recently. So there's some amount of stuff happening. I can go look that up.
Yeah, it looks like there's an ERC20 bridge. I don't know about 721, but it looks like there's at least some level of bridge there.
Good. You can make a first-person shooter now in Solana where you shoot notes at each other, and it's absolutely real time when you get hit in the face with a note. Block shooter.
I haven't read it yet, but the most recent Not Boring newsletter is all about Solana, and it's like a sponsored post just that the co-founders wanted people to understand what it's good at and what it's not so good at. So I don't know. I can share this. I haven't read it though, so.
Yeah, actually, it's funny. I think that's probably why I started looking at it, is because I skimmed that article because I do subscribe in RSS. So it came up in RSS and I was like, okay, Solana. And I didn't read any of it really. I just like, okay, let me like skim. And then I started doing my own research. But one of the founders is from Qualcomm. So that's kind of funny.
Oh, really? Funny.
Yeah. And it's named after Solana Beach, which is San Diego.
Oh.
At least that's what I heard.
That's
I think that's maybe written in the post, but yeah.
There's a bunch of blockchain stuff coming out of San Diego. I think it's probably because like, well, at least I know one person who has like a startup down there, or like a pretty big one. They came out of like, what was it? Like the peer-to-peer stuff, that round of tech that was built, and the torrent, like BitTorrent stuff.
BitTorrent.
So there's a bunch of people who made a bunch of money, and they probably moved to San Diego because it's a nice place to be. And then they're like, well, all this new peer-to-peer stuff is popping up, so maybe I think that there is something going on with that.
Makes sense.
You know,
that's interesting.
Unconfirmed though.
There is BitTorrent token, which apparently I've searched before.
There you go. Yeah, I think one of there's a thing called Everest, and they're doing like the whole stack of Web3, like identity stuff. They've done like regulation, like regulatory approval to move money from here to there. They've got like deals with like Malta and the government there and stuff. And one of the guys worked with Jordan Hall at DivX, and then he was at BitTorrent or something like that later. Yeah, it came across this, and it is so dry. Like they have videos on YouTube, and they're like, we do all this, and this all works, and this is great. And I'm just like, oh my god. You'll store all your documents, and you'll have it in a wallet. And it's very cool though.
Yeah. Wow.
Anyways, he's in San Diego is my point.
Interesting. Have you mentioned this before, Dave, by any chance? Do you think
it came up a long time ago? I think
because I also have this search, so I didn't know if this like somehow was you or from someone else. Okay.
I think we talked about this a while back because Jordan Hall has like a call with him on YouTube where they like go through a bunch of like sort of fundamental understandings of how this stuff works. This is one of the first times I'm like, this can't all work. He's just making shit up. But they're like sitting there and I'm like, well, I know the Jordan Hall dude he knows how to build things. So like, and he's not calling this guy a complete lunatic. So it was like it was like, I don't know, probably 8 months ago or something. And I saw this and I'm like, there's no way that all of this tech is easy to build. And then, well, here we are. So, I mean, easy is relative, but
I was going to say,
it doesn't take $1 billion
I guess,
to build.
But
Yeah. No,
this complexity.
This is considerably easier than I don't know, like 5 years ago, building a pretty standard Postgres kind of like web app thing that needs to scale and like all this bullshit's happening. Like things here are like new, but they're pretty straightforward once you grok them. There's like very few gotchas and like shit that comes out and bites you.
Yeah,
it's a little less scary. Nice.
It just shows up when you launch the thing, and then you just get social predators showing up and blowing up your community. Governance
predators.
Stuff is where you know what I mean. Anyhow.
Okay, so it sounds like we have a couple like distinct next steps to move towards. We have at least one. Well, so kind of following in line with like our talks about the build sessions, you know, like I think a lot of these things can kind of wrapped into under the umbrella of one of those where we implement some things that are already like laid out, but then we also do a little sketching around the publish event, a little mocking of like edit flows, and possibly the build session feels comfortable and everybody's like around, we can just like do a loop of implementing and going back to the sketch. So why don't we basically just put one of those on the calendar and kind of see where we want to go in it.
Sure. So where do you think we'll hit next? Just for like starting point wise?
There may be like a couple small things. Oh,
We're back.
Oh, the video is finally gone.
Yeah.
Operation kill the video.
Maybe.
why did it seemed like with the screen sharing it was
fine,
better?
yeah.
That makes no sense.
It's actually possible it would be, well, it's possible my feed was pulling down lower res video and only sending up my screen. I don't know. Who knows? God knows. Depending on how far away this build session is, there may be a few small things that are like pushed up before then, but roughly we can say we want to work on editing blocks and getting them into a post. Maybe just the post portion.
Yeah,
editing feels like we don't know what to edit until we have blocks that are kind of like highlighted. So highlight the blocks first. And that may involve setting up the secondary database. So maybe in that same session, we can try to route things through the graph events and see how that feels as an experiment.
Yeah, I guess we can save it for then. It should be like a pretty simple modification of the contract. I might just end up redeploying it, but we could also just go through the deploy process one more time, see where all the niggles are, and try to like get them out.
Cool.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. Cool.
Yeah, I'm just making sure. You do anything in the meantime. I'll just get the design stuff that we talked about in the page for now.
Perfect.
Cool. All right.
We want to plan this for Saturday morning, Saturday, Sunday.
I'm gone this weekend. But if you want to just do it anyhow, that also is cool with me. I can catch up relatively reasonably.
Yeah, the other unknown here is like I'm waiting for my COVID test, and that determines whether I can go down to Tijuana. So, when are you leaving, CJ? Like what?
I'm
Friday night?
probably gonna leave sometime Friday afternoon. My guess is around 12. I'm going to Arizona, so it's gonna be kind of a long drive.
Yeah, and then you're back when, do you think? Sunday night?
Either Sunday night or Monday afternoon. I don't know yet.
We could maybe say just next Monday. Probably. Next Monday evening.
Sure.
Yeah, works.
Cool. 5 p.m. for now.
Cool.
Sounds good. Yeah, I think given the week, I'll try to poke at something before then as well. I'm also like, maybe this is a side conversation that should be started within Discord, but I'm wondering if like it would be useful, interesting to have any sort of notifications pop into Discord about things that are happening within Honeycombs at any point. Basically like as kind of a conversational meta layer where maybe it's not content itself, but it's like, oh, how was your experience about like sending this block in? Did maybe like reactions, well, like emoji reactions and replies to it. I don't know, just before we have like those actions in Honeycombs, it gives us like a pretty consistent place to have them. And it would work well if like the content was also shown in the message notification. So it kind of just streamed in the blocks as they were created in Honeycombs. Not sure yet, but if that, I'll drop maybe some ideas in a new Discord channel and we could look at it there.
Like sort of prototyping conversational methods.
Pretty much, yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I think we're probably pretty close to that showing up. I mean, we're basically moving closer and closer to actually using this thing without just
blocks.
So like once that happens, definitely it'll show up, right?
Definitely. Yeah, it it feels like the level at which we are now, and like the level that we would need to use Discord as a prototype is fewer and fewer things are needing to be will need to be done in Discord, and they'll just work in the app itself.
No, I think it's a good place to prototype that stuff without.
It's a little cheaper.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. Well, it's been a delight as always.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Till next time.
Awesome. See
See
ya.
I'm waving. Bye.
You're waving. I can see the wave.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Later.